Good evening. Welcome to Productivity Compass by Zoho Projects. Today, we have a very special person amongst us, share some project management lessons. Today, we have Mr. Varun Sridhar, the Chief Executive Officer of Paytm Money. This talk is brought to you by Zoho Projects, the waterfall-based project management tool. Mr. Varun Sridhar comes with over 19 years of professional experience, primarily in retail banking, consumer finance, insurance, mutual funds, and technology services. Prior to Paytm Money, he served as the CEO of Oppo India Financial Services, where he conceptualized an innovative business involving consumer finance, UPI payments, insurance, mutual funds, and technology services. He has also worked with various other organizations such as Sharekhan, BNP Paribas, Value Partners Management Consulting, Deutsche Bank, Citibank, and Converge Labs Software. He holds an MBA from SDA Bocconi School of Management, Milan, Italy, and also a bachelor's degree in commerce from Shahid Bhagat Singh University of Delhi. Before we start, I have a few points to make. The session will last for about 45 minutes, followed by question and answers. You can post your questions in the questions tab on the left panel. The speaker will be answering them at the end of his talk. If at any point the video or audio is not clear enough, please reload or refresh the page. For more updates and future talks, do follow us at Zoho Projects. Mr. Sridhar, the forum is now all yours. Yeah, it's on now.
Yeah, I hope you're all able to see me well. Good evening. Very happy to be here with all of you. Very happy to do this session. What we'll try and do is make this useful for you. So for those of you who've joined, thank you for joining. I'm very happy to be here. The reason I decided to accept this invite very funnily is Zoho as a product. My mom has started a startup. It's based on clothes and it's an e-commerce company. And she's 65 and she retired, and she and her sister, they got together and launched a startup, and they were using a Zoho, web conferencing tool. And I got invited on one of them, and that's the first time I actually got to experience one of your products. And so I was very happy to see this Indian company go all over. And then, the second time I actually got to experience you was somebody in Europe told me about, saying, hey, there's this Indian company called Zoho. Varun, are you aware of it? So when I got the invite, I was personally happy to be here, happy to talk about the journey of my life, happy to talk about project management. The way we'll try and do this is I'm going to try and speak for about 30 minutes, maybe 25 on a monologue. Monologues are tough with Zoom calls or with these kind of calls, but I'm going to try and do that for about 30-40 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions. Along this journey, if you have somebody or you have questions for me, please keep typing on the chat. I've kept my chat open. It will make it more useful for me, right? So that, if I'm boring you or if I'm talking something that you are really interested in or curious about, it's better to ask me that right away. If I can cover it during the session, great. If not, we'll do it later. So let's begin. We'll do a quick 10-minute intro about myself, because I think what is very useful when it comes to project management, different kind of projects that I've done. So I'm basically South Indian. I was born in Hyderabad. I was brought up in Gurgaon. And since I was a child, my father used to run this B school. It was called MDI Gurgaon, if some of you know it. So he was one of the first professors of the MBA program. And so all my life, I lived inside a B school campus where project management was part of the story, right? So my favorite uncles, as I used to call them, not professors, used to talk about project management. My mom is a teacher, and she works for Hero Group of Schools, and she is the principal of this school. So she herself has done a bunch of projects in her life. And somehow as a child, when I grew up, I think I got used to the fact of doing startups, of doing 0 to 1 journeys. And you'll see that along my project that I've done a bunch of them. And yeah, Arjun, hey, happy that Paytm is here. If you have questions around Paytm, happy to answer as well. But then in 2098, I finished my schooling and I was doing well at school. And I entered a university or a college called Bhagat Singh College in Delhi University. Very cool, very nice. I was doing my chartered accountancy, and about 1 week before my inter exam, so I got a rank in foundation in my CA foundation. But 1 week before my CA inter exam, I decided to quit being a chartered accountant because I couldn't see myself behind the desk all the time. It was something, and then I decided to contest elections. I eventually went on to win it, and I realized that I have a new life. So the first project I actually got to manage in my whole life was when I was 21. It was my college annual festival, and we were doing this biggest thing in the university. So I studied in what I would not call an A-grade college in Delhi University, but a slightly lower level college, a fantastic one. But everything gets ranked. And to launch a big festival there was a huge project. So we had these 100 people working, and it's completely unorganized, messy students. But at the end, that's the fun of it. And that's the first time I realized what project management actually means, because we had this professor in our class who at that time drew a chart on on the blackboard and said, hey, Varun, you must split your teams, you must do all this. And we were 21-year-old kids who said, what nonsense is this professor talking? But looking back, those advice, the ability to manage a large event, a large project, a fairly longish thing, because my project that time was 3 months long, right? To launch an annual festival with 10,000 people involved takes about 3 months of planning. But that was the first time I actually did something. Then I went on to work in a software company which went bankrupt, and I wanted to run away from Gurgaon. So I went all the way into Cochin, where I got a job in Citibank as a sales officer. So I was one of those guys that you see selling credit cards, personal loans, and all those products. So I started my career there in 2003 in Citibank. I worked with Citi for about 3 years. And I think that's the second time I actually got to see what a project means. During my Citi days, the project that I did, or the second project maybe in my life that I got to see, was something with the launch of personal loans in Cochin. So the job was to set up a massive business. And then somebody came from head office and said, we need to do all these steps. This is the technology, this is the product, this is the execution, this is the way we want to test, this is our marketing plan, blah, blah, blah. So a massive project got set out, and I was playing one of the parts. So it's the second time in my life I actually got to meet somebody on projects, and nice experience. But honestly, I didn't have control over it. And I personally, again, in my life felt that there is too much organization for something that I think I could do in a simple way with a pen paper or in my mind. But somehow the head office team wanted to do a project, and so we did it. And eventually, we did well, we did great numbers and so on and so forth. But at the end of 3 years, I got bored with Citibank. And one of my bosses then was launching, in my mind, my first project. It's called Deutsche Bank. So Deutsche Bank's retail banking operations, I was one of the first employees, and we launched it as a team together. During those 2 years, which is 2006 to 2008, I had a fantastic time, what I would call in my life, my biggest learning. So we launched a full-fledged business, grounds up. And this is what you see today in terms of Deutsche Bank in India. And all of that was done in a period of 2 years. So there I learned how to serve coffee, how to sleep in conference rooms, how to write ITBRDs, how to write FSDs, product notes, risk note, analytics notes, strategy notes, and so on and so forth. Right. So back in 2006 to 2008, I too understood, maybe even appreciated first time. And I forgot the tool we used to use back then, but it was a massive project tool. I think it was MS Projects most probably, which was used by us to map out how 1,000 people across India, across functions would work to launch a bank. And it's not an easy task, right? And I think that's where I learned banking. Then in 2008, as it happened, I was not an MBA. I was from, like I mentioned, from Bhagat Singh College, and I'd done my BCom honors there. So the same job was available in China, and I was obsessed with Oriental culture, and I wanted to go to China, and I had this dream. I was, 27, 28, and I was like, I just want to do this. But eventually they told me, hey, you're not an MBA, so you can't take the job. Why don't we send you to Germany, or you do something else in the bank? And for me, that was not on. So I decided to do my MBA, and I went to Italy to study. And I did my MBA from a school called Bocconi, where for the first time ever in my life, I had a project management professor who came and said, hey, look, I want to talk to you about how do you run large scale projects. And he said, look, I'm not going to give you the theory. You read this book and you read all these case studies. But what I'm going to try and teach you is a bit of the practical stuff. And I think his learnings were so great. And I'll try and replicate some of those learnings as I go along, as I manage projects, so that maybe from your perspective, you say, hey, what value can I derive from these 45 minutes, right? So I did that. I studied at Bocconi. Funnily, I wanted to be an investment banker. I was a retail banker. And day one of my school, Lehman Brothers crisis happened, and the economy collapsed, as you know. So 2008, 2009 was the worst time if you ever wanted to do something. So as today we sit in Corona, and as we sit in COVID, and we are in this pandemic, and we are in this massively not pleasant situation, I've been exactly here, but back in 2008. So back in 2008, when we were running this session, from my perspective, the real thought was, hey, how do you get out of a crisis? Right? What can you do? How can you organize yourself? And so 2008 was a very tough year. At the end of it, I got a job. I did almost a free internship in Dubai with a McKinsey spin-off, which was a management consulting firm, which specialized in telecom projects. So the largest scale 3G installations at that time, back in 2008, we used to do 3G in Oman, in Dubai, are all done by this company. And so I worked for them. And I think that's the first time I actually got to use what I would call how to run a large scale mission, how to run a large scale business, but as a consultant, right? So I got that job. I did my free internship. We did very well, and I got my pre-placement offer. And finally, back in 2009, my dreams of being an investment banker were gone, and I was back doing retail banking, but as a management consultant in Dubai. My first few projects happened to be in Egypt, where I was restructuring a bank. And these banks were retail banks, largely defunct, largely not doing so well. And my job was to go in 6 months, 9 months, transform a full bank. And the bank, a size of about 8 to 10,000 odd employees. I was 31 back then. To do those large projects is a very, very tough thing. And especially as a management consultant, you get billed crazy rates. So the client almost wants to make sure that what you talk is actually delivered and is useful. So from our perspective, back in 2009, I started these projects in Egypt, and we did very well. We were very successful in transforming very large banks, which have been stuck 10 years, 20 years, in a space of 3 to 6 months. And I had this very strange boss who didn't believe in project management. So he said, look, life is not about managing in a very organized way. Life is about mixing the beautifully organized, because I had been taught by them that if you want to run something large, you first organize, you structure, you put them in place, and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of it, when you have a project where you've done and you at least believe that this is a massive transformation, and your boss comes and tells you, hey, look, we don't want to really work so hard on managing the project. We actually want to get the work done. And these are two different things. And it's the first time that I said, okay, I trust you. You're the boss. You tell me what to do. And so we got our hands very dirty with this bank. It was called Arab African International Bank. And we managed to restructure a full-fledged retail division in a very, very short time. Right? And we did it without any tools. We did it basically of PPT, of Excel, and it succeeded. Then came the next big bank, which was Bank Masr, or the Bank of Egypt, or State Bank of Egypt, if you want. It's the comparison of State Bank of India. And they also had a project which they wanted us to run. And we ran that as well. And we became very successful. Though this time around, the bank insisted that we should have a lot of formalization, reporting, governance, structure, sponsors, and committees. And as a young person who was very used to running very hard, I realized that for the first time, these things can cause trouble. But I always trusted somebody. So I said, okay, I will trust them. They maybe have better wisdom than I do. And so we got into this project and we did really well because it's beautifully organized. We never missed a single date. We never missed a single slot. We never missed a single budget. Beautifully well done, executed in a cool way. So now it's a very strange situation where I had seen a very unorganized project, so to speak, and a very organized one, and both had succeeded. So then I went on to my third project, which was BNP Paribas in Egypt, which later happened to be my employer for 8 odd years. I worked with them. It's my longest job, a very proud moment for me. But it started off with a very strange story. In 2011, 28 January, there was the Arab Spring. If some of you follow the Egyptian revolution. So I was there. Our office was on Tahrir Square, and the bank was burnt. So it was a very strange situation where, the bank was burnt. The CEO of the bank called us and said, hey, look, there is no strategy project here to do. Please go back and we'll figure this out after Egypt is back to normal. But my boss being my boss and me being me, we decided, hey, look, this is the time to truly be with the client. Let's roll up our sleeves and help restart the bank. So we sent our families back and we got together and we restarted the bank in 21 odd days. We were the first ones to do so. And we got great praise from the regulator, from the bank, etc., etc. So 3 months after that, when the project was finished and we were headed back, the CEO of the bank called and said, hey, Varun, we would like to make you head of retail banking, private banking, SME, and all of that. And I was 31. And the only question I remember asking him was, hey, what would my business card read? Right? It was such a funny situation. He said, it will be board of directors. I said, wow, that's cool. And I said, sir, I'm agreeing to the job. He said, you want to know your salary? You don't want to know anything else? I said, no, I'm fine. As long as it reads board of directors, because in my mind was this nice dream vision of me walking into a boardroom, wearing a nice suit and somebody coming and giving me a glass of water, files opening. classic Bollywood movie or a Hollywood movie, as you may want. But that was my imagination of what I felt was the right thing to do. So I took that job. Happened to be one of the best decisions of my life. I worked in BNP Paribas for 8 years. I want to give you an idea of a few projects I did there, and later we'll talk about how I managed those and what are the key learnings that I could have and what are the key learnings I could pass to some of you that could be practical. So I got into the bank in Egypt, and the first task given was to sell the bank. They said, "Hey, look, you need to sell this bank because in Egypt there's too much of socio-political crisis, and we don't think we can survive here. And the only way you can sell is if retail becomes profitable." And I was running almost a bankrupt business line with 2,000 people. And they said, "Hey, look, you need to restructure this whole thing." And so I did. We got into this event, this big project with them over 18 months. And they asked me to fire half my team. And I said, "Look, I don't want to fire a single person. Give me 3 months, I'll set the ship on order and I'll make this work." For the next 18 months, we ran about maybe 130 projects, all in parallel, small and big, critical, non-critical, any and everything that you can imagine that it takes to restructure a bank. And we got it done. We sold the bank successfully to Emirates NBD in Dubai, and therefore my boss was very happy with me. I got a nice big bonus in my life for the first time, and then he said, "Okay, come to Paris." So I worked in Paris. From Paris, I did a bunch of projects. I launched a digital bank in China, and whenever I say I, it doesn't mean Varun alone. I realized along this journey that you can only succeed when you have a great team. Otherwise, everything else is useless. So we launched a digital bank in Europe. It's called Hello Bank, if you want to go and have a look. We launched a bank in China. We bought a bank in Poland, and I was responsible to merge two very large banks with about 15,000 people. We launched multiple credit card businesses, digital banks in Turkey, in San Francisco. I was working a bit in Morocco. So we had Poland, Ukraine, Turkey, China, America, and I was flying from one end of the continent to the other, trying to do multiple big projects. And so anything that I did, my boss was the boss of all these banks. He was the boss of 16 banks, and I was like his Bruce Willis. I don't know if you've seen the movie Die Hard, but I was like his boy who would go into a company and do the toughest projects and talk to people. Sorry, I'm running a small cold. And he would do these toughest projects, and I would get those projects organized. And at the end of those projects, my job was to get out. And I was not so happy because I would work very hard to actually finish projects which are very tough to do, which are not so easy. But once done, I would have to exit and I would have to do my own stuff. And that was not easy for me, but I used to consistently do it. And at one moment I said, "Hey, look, Mr. Modi is running around India. India's shining. I wanted to come back home. I felt that after 8-10 years outside India, I wanted this opportunity to be made in India by myself." So I came back to India at that very moment. And somebody's asked me a question saying, "How's the banking experience?" And I'll talk about that as I come back to India. I came back to India to buy this company called Sharekhan. So I bought Sharekhan on behalf of BNP Paribas, and I ran it for about 2-3 years when I left. So 8 years was with BNP. Sharekhan was my first true project. I've done all these projects in my life, but I don't call them true projects because that was my first idea. It was my thought to say, "Hey, look, let's do something in India." I originated it. I got it done. I bought the company. I ran the company. I ran a Vision 2020 project. We did all of that. And that's a good 4-year effort. Right? So that's a massive project to run. The company, when we took over, had 3,200 odd people. Then when I left, it had about 6,000 odd people. So that was a massive, tough project to run where we had our share of successes and our share of failures. Right? So we did all that. And at the end of it, one fine day, I was bored and I told my boss, "Hey, look, I want to launch my own NBFC." And so we did. And 30 days from launch, it was another project that I was managing. My boss called and said, "Hey, look, Varun, we need to shut it down because of the ILFS." So you would notice in my life that I have a lot of crisis. 2008, I tried to do my MBA when crisis came. On my first day, then 2011 was Egypt. 2014 was the Greek sovereign debt crisis. 2018 was Sharekhan, where BNP Paribas decided to close my project. And I told BNP saying, "Hey, look, I've made tons of money for you. Time for me to please, let me go. And I want to do my own stuff. Please give me 6 months. I don't want to fire my team." I had hired a team of 100 people and they wanted me to terminate everybody and for me to come back to Europe and do a job of a CEO. But I said, "No, I want to now stay back in India and do my own thing." So I sold that set of people and myself to a company called Oppo. As you all know, Oppo is Oppo, OnePlus, Realme, and Vivo put together. So I sold myself to that company, and I was working with them for a year and a half. And then Paytm happened about 4 months back. Vijay is a fantastic guy. I think the most, he's such a fantastic guy. He's changed India. You all know what Paytm has done. Today as Paytm, we do over 30 million transactions a day. We have a customer base of about 400 odd million. We have 50% market share on FASTag. We are India's largest gaming company. Paytm Money, which I run today, is India's largest SIP provider. We have multiple businesses on lending, on insurance, on e-commerce. We have about 70 business lines. And I can tell you, I've never seen somebody like Vijay who would get into something and manage a project single-handedly without an organization and get it out of the way and make it super successful across India. And that's what Paytm has done consistently. We are India's largest by far payment company, both on the gateway side and on the issuance side. And other than that, all these other side businesses, ancillary businesses put together, we are valued at about 16 billion US dollars. And all of that has happened, I would say, with a very haphazard organization, if you look at it from outside. But deep inside, some project management principles are very strongly dealt with. So today, what do I do? That's a bit my introduction to all of you. And the reason I wanted to give that introduction is to set the context on the different projects I've done, and what kind of effort and what kind of journey I've been through. But as I come here today, what do I manage? So I'm currently managing what we would want to call India's largest digital wealth management platform. So I run a mutual fund business where we are first in India on SIPs. We started about 2 years back. I have an equity brokerage business, which was very recently launched. We have a digital gold business where we are India's 50% market share on digital gold. And the last business which we run is National Pension Savings Plan, or NPS as we call it, where you can save for your retirement. So this is what I run today within Paytm. So I'm part of I'm one of the businesses which we call as wealth business or wealth management business. Right now, why did I give you all those examples? And I'll take Pratik's question, which says, hey, how different is banking in BNP Paribas, Deutsche Bank as compared to India? I think, each country and each culture is very, very different. And as you start to live, and I work now in France, in Germany, where I used to run a digital broker, obviously in Deutsche Bank, in Poland, Ukraine, Turkey, China. In China, I worked in 2014-15, and then obviously in Oppo with the Chinese head office in Shenzhen. And what I've realized is each culture has its nuances. And if you don't understand those nuances, you'll run the project wrongly. So for example, BNP Paribas is very organized, very structured. A lot of thinking is front-loaded, which means that you don't go into any business, any project, any idea very fast. It takes a long time before you germinate an idea. But once you germinate an idea, by the way, that's the question. Just give me a second. Sorry, that's the question that Pratik was asking, which I'm taking, is, once you germinate an idea, I think there's a debate, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? Right? So we spend, for example, the acquisition of Sharekhan was a long process. The launch of a discount broker in Sharekhan was a 2-year process, 18-month process. There's a lot of debate. But once the debate is done, once everybody is agreed, then there is relentless execution for a longer time. I think mostly continental European companies, a lot of thinking, very organized, very clear, fairly safe. If you look at Indian companies, on the other hand, I'll give you an example of Paytm. We go into it very, very fast. So we think, hey, look, there's this idea, there is this moment. How much time will it take me to put up a tech platform? Maybe a week, maybe 10 days, maybe 20 days, maybe 3 months. Now, how can I make those 3 months into 3 days, into 3 weeks? Can I put 200 engineers and get this done? Can I get 20 product managers? And I think that agility in India to say, okay, let's get into it and we'll figure it out along the way means your start is faster, but the end may or may not be good depending on how good your ability to solve the problem is. So when I look at BNP Paribas, when I look at Deutsche Bank, I think they're very organized at the beginning in banking, but towards the later part, execution is relentless and perfect. I think Indians are much faster. So everything happens very, very fast. But maybe because it's happening too fast, the organization is a bit weak, the implementation is a bit weak. So quality at the end of the day starts to suffer. And then there is a long process of fixing things, which can be painful, depends on how you do it. So some companies do a great job. Paytm, for example, in my mind, does a fantastic job with some things, also has had its share of failures. Right? Not everything in Paytm is successful. Same for Shekhan, same for some of the other companies that I work, and same for me. So, I hope I answered that question. But maybe I'll take some time, and the session today was about project management, to talk about 3-4 things that I've learned on project management along this journey. Right. So first thing, I believe that you should organize everything, but there's a limit to what you can organize, and you should not try and organize everything. So projects fail when it is too over organized, because too over organization. I love project tools, and I saw Zoho's tool today and want to experiment it and try and see if it works very well. Does it? What are the features? What are the advantages? But I think fundamentally, I have met project managers who organize everything so much that they over organize. When you over organize, which means that everybody exactly knows what has to be done when, you kill innovation, you kill speed, you kill agility. So I think there's a right balance to find between saying, how deep do you want to organize and how much do you want to leave open? Now, my trick for that is some things need to be organized brilliantly and some things completely need to be left open. So, for example, thinking, ideating, setting the context should not be so organized. Because if you organize ideation, it won't work. It's like saying, hey, paint, but I will draw all the square boxes for you. That's not painting. That's like buying a crayon book off the shelf, right? You can't call that a painting. But when it gets down to execution of certain parts, it's good to organize those modules. So I think a balance there, and that's my first learning, what I've realized along these 18, 20 years of work experience that I've had, that finding the balance is critical, and that balance is very contextual, right? So let me give you an example. In Egypt, if I had, my boss had given me a deadline saying fire people in 30 days. If I started to make a project management office at that time, I would have failed because the people beneath wanted to see action, right? So I had to show them action first. 3 months later, I organized it into a project management office. Back in Sherkhan, when we had acquired the company, I think BNP Paribas wanted to see project management first and then an action. If at that time I had directly gone in and started executing and not thought of action, I would have failed. So I think different context decides what goes first, how much you organize, how much you don't. But I think there always has to be a fair share of balance and dynamism in that. It doesn't mean that once you organize. So I hate project managers, for example. I used to have a PMO office and this amazingly brilliant girl. And for her, everything was organized. And she said, hey, look, Varun, this is on an Excel sheet. This is on my MS Project 2. I don't want to change it. And that doesn't work. I think you have to be agile, which is my first message. So think about a rubber band and try and keep stretching the rubber band. A rubber band don't break it, but a rubber band can be an 8, can be an infinity, can be a square, can be a circle, can be anything. That's my first message to all of you. My second message on project management is learn to celebrate small milestones. Mostly, great projects are a combination of thousands of events which together give a final big event. Most projects fail because people get tired, right? It's like you're running this race, and you're running a marathon. I don't know how many of you run, but I do. And when you run 21 kilometers, if you get the reward at the end of 21 kilometers, it's too long. Honestly, at the end of, so I run in Bombay, and the fun part is the first 5 kilometers, you get to run on the ceiling. It's phenomenal because on the ceiling, you can never run. It's the first time you run on the sea, so to speak, so it's super cool. Right? Normally you cross it with the car, and now you're having this opportunity to do it otherwise. So I think that's super nice. That's your first methodology where you say, hey, look, how can I get small milestones and make sure that they add up? So a great leader would be able to organize small milestones. And as you get there, start celebrating. Now, some of those milestones can also be failures, which is the second thing I always tell in India. And this is very Indian context. Having worked in so many countries, I can tell you, Indians are great at celebrating, but horrible at accepting failure, right? Horrible at accepting criticism. And I think it's in our culture, it's in our DNA, that if somebody comes to you and says, hey, look, you've done a bad job, we're like, oh, this guy he hates me, it's political, she's like this, and it goes into a different tailspin. So we used to have a very funny exercise in Germany. in a bank called Consource Bank, where they used to say the product manager or the business lead gets criticized. So it's called the criticism day. So the only thing people can do for the next 1 hour is criticize your project, whatever your idea, your thought, blah, blah, blah. And I think there the issue is when you're talking about celebrating milestones, ask yourself that you should celebrate small milestones. And at the same time, if there is a failure, learn to embrace it. So have a session, cry about it if you want, look at it inside saying, what could I have done better? But at the end of it, also celebrate the fact that you've done it. So I always call this saying, hey, look for champagne moments. Look for moments when you can open a bottle. I drink, right? So look for a moment when you can distribute laddus if you like, right? If you're not drinking. Look for a moment where you can go out with your team and say, hey, look, let's just play bowling. But organizing those moments makes people believe that, hey, they're in a journey. Like at the end of 5 kilometers of a marathon, you see something. At the end of 15 kilometers, there are kids distributing chocolates to you, holding boards, saying, hey, another 6 kilometers to go. And you look back and think, hey, I've done 15. Hard work's behind me. I've got 6 more to do. How tough could it be? Right? And I think that makes all the difference as you go along the journey of doing a longish, important strategic project. Like the project with Sheikh Khan was worth 3,000 crores. Right? So when you're running a 2-3,000 crore project, you need to know how to celebrate that 10 lakh rupee victory, how to celebrate a small launch. Otherwise, you're waiting for this grand moment. When it comes, you're all alone because the people behind you have changed or they've got fatigued. Right? Both are not good things. So think about it as message number 2. Message number 3 is a strange one. Ideas don't have value, implementation does. Now, when you run a project, there are lots of ideas. What do you want to reward? You want to reward a fantastic idea which has been executed poorly, or do you want to reward great execution? And I think great projects are done because everybody has brilliant ideas, right? There's so many Ubers, so many wealth management firms, so many Paytms. Who has succeeded? Who do you remember? And so many Zohos, right? But only a few actually come out because implementation is brilliant. Now, what typically ends up happening in a very large scale project or a business, right? Like the maximum team I ever managed was about 10,000 people. And you always get to reward the bright, shiny person who has a great idea. But normally the quiet person who's sitting in the back who's actually getting all the work done, and his or her job is actually boring. Now, his or her job is to come to the office and do the same thing again and again. But the fact is that person allows you to offer a great product. That person allows you to make sure that the product that is offered to the customer is consistent, is stable, is something that is of high quality. So if you start rewarding in your projects, in your thought process, in the way you manage a business implementation, it makes all the difference. So for example, if you are a product manager, right, and you've been told, let's take the example of Paytm Money. Right? We've just launched this equity business and we have a vision to be India's #1 digital broker. Now, if I have to, my team is currently launching futures and options. Now I have 2 choices. I could reward somebody who designs this very fancy product, or I could say, hey, look, get the basics right. We're just going to launch futures and options. It's a 20-year-old mature market. Can you please make sure that the base of it works? And I think the person who does that is often not the most interesting person that you would find, or the most flashy person, or the person with the highest salary in the room. And often the recognition is wrongly placed. So I think fixing that in a structured way from a project management perspective really helps you run large things very well. Right? So that's message number 3. Message number 4 is people. That's a strange one in India, right? So when I moved back, I realized that in India, large-scale projects happen with a lot of yes men around, or a lot of people who agree to the same notion. And people look for saying, hey, look, I'm launching this mission. Are you aligned to my vision? If you're aligned, you're part of the team. If you're not aligned, best of luck. More often than not, a great team means people who have contrarian views, right? And I used to love this about the French, that in a team, you would have one person who believes in the project and one who doesn't, right? And it's very, very strange because all of a sudden you have a guy saying, disrupt everything in India. And the other person saying, yeah, but somebody else also tried and they failed. So you have a naysayer, or what you call a pessimist, or somebody who keeps pulling down the team as you call. Now, the thing is, obviously you need a positive oriented person at the top, but you also need somebody to counterbalance, because more often than not, the toughest questions are not asked by somebody who's very positive because it's lost. Very tough to find balance, right? And that's why, for example, in financial services, you have a lot of people who manage what we call control functions. So you have risk management, you have compliance, you have audit, you have second level audit, you have operations, and so on and so forth. All those people, their only job is to tell the business guy that, hey, look, what you're doing needs to be controlled, needs to be within law. Are you worried about data privacy? Are you worried about IT security? Are you worried about how the user will use this? And those questions which you may think are inherent, normally in a project team are missing, and especially in India, I find the culture of getting two people who are not necessarily agreeing to the same vision, but at least have the same thought process and the willingness to do it together is very tough. Because it's easier to work with people who you're happy with than with people who challenge you every day, right? And I think that amount of challenge, if you can institutionalize in a project management framework, you have a very nice checks and balances running along, which keeps the system robust and which keeps the final product very nice. So these are the 3-4 messages that I wanted to send. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to start taking a few questions, and I'll have some things to say at the end about Paytm and Paytm Money. But I'm going to take Nitin's question, which is put on. He says, hey, hi Nitin. He says, hey, love the way Paytm Money is disrupting the ecosystems. Any plans to share wealth management lessons for first-time investors, similar to FinShort's? Financial literacy in India is very low. Yeah, that's an excellent question, Nitin. I've always said this, and I'll say it again. I think, first of all, thank you. Paytm Money is truly trying to disrupt. When I took over the job, one of the first things I noticed is in 2 years' time, during my interview, I realized the statistic that in 2 years, we've got a customer from 99% of all PIN codes of India investing in mutual funds. That is fantastic, right? You imagine 99% of all PIN codes in India were bigger than the Indian Post Office or bigger than any bank. And we managed to reach there with the power of a mobile phone and equip that last mile customer with a mutual fund, which is only 100 rupees. So the minimum amount you get in is $1.5. And that's amazing, right? When you get in with those kind of costs and you're able to deliver that kind of product at scale, you've done something very nice. And the only person I thank for that is Vijay, because I think he has this vision of what India should be, and Paytm therefore executes it. And now that I am at Paytm Money, how are we planning to think about it for first-time investors? I think our thought is very simple. Indians, the peculiar or the funny thing in India is we make great doctors, engineers, architects, chartered accountants, software developers, hackers, sports persons, politicians, but we don't teach any of them how to manage money. Right? In our courses, wealth management, money management, savings is missing. So if I ask the best engineer in the topmost company like Zoho, if I call your VP of tech and say, hey, look, tell me with 500 rupees, which are the 3 SIPs you would take, he or she is not able to answer that question, which is very, very unfair, because managing money, I don't say money is everything in life, but money plays a very important role, and we all work for financial wealth because it helps us fulfill other goals. It's not the only goal in life, but it's one of the main goals for most people. Now, for that main goal for which you worked so hard, you don't know how to manage. And I think therefore, learn first or educate yourself first is something that I've been preaching for a very long time of my life, 15 years. I come from a family of teachers, so they used to tell me, don't swim if you have not taken a swimming lesson. So the first time I went diving, I took a 5-day proper course. It's required, but I also wanted to take it. Right, the first time I went skydiving, I actually took a course. The first time I tried to run a marathon, I actually went to a trainer and say, how do you run 21 kilometers? There is some science, right? There was some knowledge. But I think today, I'm very happy that Indians are slowly discovering financial literacy. People are making an effort. As Paytm Money, we will launch an education business. You will see it, maybe in the next 1 year or so. There's a project which is what we are working on, because we think that education is very important. We are also right now trying to work with our colleagues, with our customers, to ask a very fundamental question, saying, hey, what are your financial goals? How do you do it? How can we help you get there? And to make financial literacy a part of the wealth management platform, rather than to say, hey, look, you go study elsewhere and then you come here. So yeah, we are working on that. Yeah. So that's Nitin's question. I'm going to stop for a bit and let you guys ask me some questions. Otherwise, I have a last few things to say. Okay, I think we'll wait. Yeah, we've got a question. How did you, so let me project the question. So Arjun says, how did you test your idea? Did you make prototypes? How do you ideate? So let's take few examples, right? Let's take an example of what I'm doing right now. What I'm doing right now is launching a equity brokerage platform. So what do I do? So if you follow my Twitter or LinkedIn, you'll actually see me answer customer queries. So in a day, I answer about 5 queries, and my Twitter would have about 300 to 400 DMs, not in a day, in a month. And I answer all those customers myself. Some of them I actually call and I talk to them. Right now, why do I do that? Fundamentally, as a as a CEO, I don't need to actually go and do customer service, right? I have customer service team to do that. But I do that because it helps me keep my ears to the ground. Sorry, I'm running a small cold, but it helps me keep my ear to the ground. And what that does is I'm directly connected to a customer who says, "Hey Varun, I'm using this. This is how it doesn't work." Right now, that's my idea origination. So I get a lot of ideas by doing these sessions. Right now, why do I do these sessions? Because I get to meet young people who will ask you some very strange questions. And I was doing a session in ISB. Somebody asked me a question that became an idea which we are now executing. Right. So for me, it works very well. So how do I get my idea is part A of the problem. Once you've got your idea, so I originate my ideas either through chatting with my customers or through doing these sessions with people who are not connected to my ecosystem. And obviously, my own employees who are very connected, and regulators, stakeholders, my investors. Now, that's part A, because it's very important to say where did the idea come from. Then how do you test it, right? The way I believe in testing or doing prototypes is super fast. You need to be extremely fast in being able to test, and you need to test very at a fairly important scale, because testing with 20, 30, 40, 50 people doesn't help. So for example, when we launched our equity broking platform, we had a early access. So we had 2.5 lakh people or 250,000 people joining the early access program. Once those people joined the early access, we started releasing the customers to our product in phases. We didn't release all 250,000 at one because I can't get feedback. Because what does testing mean? Testing means hearing feedback. Now I see most people, they make a very simple mistake. They convert feedback to data, data to analysis, analysis to output, output to something else, and then they say, okay, now let me get feedback about my idea. Why would you do all that? Why would you not directly talk to somebody? Right? So what we did was we started releasing 5,000 customers every day. And as those customers came to our platform, they started to say, this works very well, this doesn't work very well. When they say this doesn't work very well, you pick up the phone and talk to them, and that's a great way to get instant feedback. Now, while you're doing those conversations, most people are very good at expressing negative emotion, very weak at expressing positive emotion. Like it's very difficult to say I love you, but it's very easy to say, hey, I don't like this person. It's very difficult to say I love your food and this is great, but it's very difficult to say this is not so good. Right? So I think getting emotions out, both positive and negative, is something that you need to do during your tests. Now, whether you do it analytically, whether you do it technologically, whether you do it humanly, I think there's a combo involved. Right? So what I typically do is after the ideation session, after I get my idea, it's launched. Once it's launched, we have a phased customer rollout, which allows us to actually get feedback. Once the phased customer rollout is finished, what we very quickly do is try and get it back again to the same set of customers and saying, hey, look, you've done this, what do you think? And I think doing those loops again and again religiously is important. The last thing I do is I do 80-20. It's impossible to solve everything. You need to find the big elephant in the room. Now, the biggest problem is more often than not, you find the wrong elephant, right? And you're trying to fix the tail when the elephant's trunk is the one that you need to get out of the room. So that's something that I do. And how do you make, did we make prototypes? Yeah, we do. So we do two types of prototypes. Normally we do what you would call a soft mock-up, which is basically screens. And then we would do hard mock-ups, which are actual mockups shown to customers, and then we have the live beta rollouts, then we have early access rollouts, and then we do the final product, right? So I'm going to take the next question. Dinesh's question is, how does the impact of financial services post-COVID? I think, the world was anyway changing before COVID very rapidly. I used to work for a phone company and I could see the future. The future was really different. The future was rapidly changing, and I personally felt that there's a day and a moment when everything would change. Now, COVID has changed the world because we work from home. I'm doing these sessions with you sitting at my home in Bombay. Uh, Everything is changing as we speak. And financial services post COVID will be a very, very new world. A new world where two, three trends are happening. Trend number one, I think, is the confluence of technology, digital, and analytics. Earlier, you could say, hey, look, tech alone will make the change. And that's been old trend now, 10 years maybe. Then digital came in about 5-6 years back. Analytics came in 2-3 years back. I think post-COVID, what's going to happen is all the three together will be the new solution. So let's take an example. Paytm started doing post-paid loans. So these are very small ticket personal loans that we do on our phones. We've done about 50 lakh loans in the last 12 months. That's a very, very large number of people who've got very small personal loans from us in a pure digital, instant, 1 second loan process. Right now, that's not easy to do. I think things like models like that, products like that will start coming out, and the financial services that you saw before will get disrupted. So I think that's change one. Change two is on the customer side. I think customers have realized the value of DIY. Earlier, India was an assisted country. So if you wanted to do something, you would research online, but purchase offline or at least validate offline. So you would call somebody, a friend, somebody, and say, can I do this? I think that journey is now gone. And what's happening or what will happen post-COVID is you will research online, buy online, validate online, follow up online. Right now, I think that is a huge change because a huge part of Indian financial services was linked because either the regulator or the bank or somebody in the system wanted you to talk or somebody to talk to you. I think that's gone. People will talk less and will act more. And that means for the fintech services business, for the product managers, for the project managers, for everybody, it's really a different world. And I think the last thing that is going to change after COVID is the attention to what I would call risk management. I come from, I've spent 8 years in BNP Paribas, where the CEO of the bank used to say, our biggest competitive advantage is compliance and risk management. And we would be like, dude, you're joking. Your biggest advantage should be regulation, should be agility, should be speed, should be cost. And he used to say, no, no, no. Our biggest advantage in the long run will be compliance and regulation because that's what the world goes through. Now, when you look at post-COVID, you see how active our regulators in India are, how active the government is to manage these situations. So that activism is good. That activism is nice. And I think the financial services, if you're an employee or you're working, I think you need to get up and start asking yourself what's happening there, which was not so important in India before. And I think that's what is changing rapidly because the impact of somebody like a SEBI or an RBI or an NPCI or all those institutional bodies making a change can be a great thing for your business. Overnight, you can be 100x of your business, or overnight your business model could be closed. So yeah, so post-COVID, I think the world of financial services completely changed. It's a fun, exciting new place to be. So if you're looking for a job or you're planning to start your own startup or you're already working there, I think, embrace the new. I think it's super cool and super nice. For the people asking questions, if I haven't answered and you want to ask a follow-on question, please do. Raj asks me a question. How do you get funding for a good idea? What's your take on VC funding? How do you take your investors on your side during tough times? I'll answer the third question first. How do you take your investors on your side during tough times? I think I've been through 4 very difficult situations in my life. You may all think that being CEO of Paytm Money is fantastic. It's great. For sure it is. It's lovely. I enjoy my job. But behind all this job is a lot of lost hair. I don't know if you saw my photos that my PR team gives. It is a lot of hair. And all of that is gone because of project management and all the fun that I have during my work. But I think the thing is, you will have tough times. I always follow 3 very simple rules with my investors. First is transparency. Say what it is, as it is, from day 0 to day 100. Because if you are trying to sugarcoat, or you're trying to show a different number, or you're trying to show something else, eventually they'll figure out and then you lose trust. So that's first. Second, during tough times, decisions need to be taken. So take tough decisions. If the tough decision means cost cutting and you have to do it, think about it 1,000 times, but do it. If you have to change a business model, do it. The worst thing I think with an investor or with your stakeholders or with your employees is during tough times you're indecisive. You're not able to make a decision. And the third thing I say is learn to talk. Most people under communicate, and so you should over communicate during tough times because everybody is anxious, and communication allows the other person to feel, hey, look, this is okay, this is going well. So that's your question 3. I'll now take the first 2 questions. What's my take on VC funding? I think it's fantastic. There are lots of Indians. I love young. The reason I came back to India is I saw all these young Indian people, all these fellow classmates, colleagues who are doing excellent. And I was like, dude, India or Bharat? Bharat is what I love more than India because I think people in India are privileged. People in Bharat have better ideas. They do it at a cheaper price and they're far more hardworking. And I find that there's this whole set of people who had ideas but did not have the money to execute, and now they're able to execute. So if you look at somebody like Vijay, I think he is where he is because PVCs funded him. He's also where he is because he's just fantastic in being able to be that guy from Bharat who's really made it big, right? And who now funds. He himself may have about 30, 40 personal investments, which he does. Now, how do you get funding for a good idea? I wouldn't fund half a rupee for a good idea. I would fund crores for an idea that is partially being implemented. I think you need to take the owner's idea. Like I said, ideas have no value, implementation does. You need to show proof of the pudding. You need to show your POCs. You need to show that some customers accept it. And for that, you need to go through that process. Now you would say, hey, look, if I had the money to go through a POC, why would I come to a VC? But I think that's the only tricky part of this equation that you need to figure out. And that's why they call it bootstrapping. That's why they call it doing it on your own. And I've seen one of the Zoho videos that there's zero external funding. I think that's super cool, right? Because if you're able to build a company grounds up, that's the best thing you can do because I just think it makes all the difference. There are a lot of people who would fund you for an idea, but I think VCs, Ps are far more mature now. Nobody funds anymore for a great idea. They fund for a great idea, a committed, fantastic team, and a bit of what I would call proof of the pudding. That actually your roti tastes as nice or your pizza tastes as nice as you want it to make me believe that it is. I hope I answered your question, Raj. I'm going to take the next question. Pratik asks me, how can project managers motivate their teams? Does it depend on creating a rewarding experience, or should we focus on making sure they believe in the vision? Very good question, Pratik. I believe in doing 2 things. I'm personally of the very strong, I'm a materialistic person. Okay, so I'm very strongly opinionated to the fact that at the end of the day, most people work to have that extra benefit, either monetary or something like what I would call recognition. So these are 2 things that the human body and the human mind needs. So I'm very personally materialistic, so to speak, that if I worked hard for 1 year and my boss doesn't call me and give me an award, or my bonus doesn't go up, or my salary doesn't go up, or I don't get a nice ESOP, I'm like, dude, I'm happy that I'm doing, I believe in your vision, I'm happy that I'm doing this fantastic project, but it doesn't work for me. Now, that's the kind of person I am. I've come to realize that 60-70% of people are either like that or they're not willing to accept they're like that, but they think like that. So the majority of people, I think if they are like that, you need to have, in my mind, a strong monetary system. For example, what is the benefit for somebody working the next 3 years non-stop on a vision? You need to answer it at the day 1, not midway in 18 months saying, acha, aap karo, fir main dekhta hu. That doesn't work because the person doesn't know what he or she is going to derive at the end of this. But having said that, I think that is the second follow-up of vision. Now, you will find people who are aligned to vision. You will find people who are aligned to the why, but not the what. So you need to differentiate a bit. Because if you have everybody aligned to the why and the what, then, I kind of find challenge missing in the project team. But I think as a project manager, motivating teams using monetary benefits, which are both short-term and long-term, sharing wealth, so wealth creation benefits, making sure that there is recognition. making sure that somebody, he or she is recognized for exemplary work are very important, because you need to identify merit and reward it. Otherwise, everybody becomes average. And the truth of life is there's a bell curve for everything, right? So if you're not able to reward at the top of the bell curve, you'll have everybody going to the other end of the curve. So you need to make sure that that works. And yeah, vision alignment, I think, is a gradual process. Most people think in a 1 hour interview, I'll align with your vision. It's complete nonsense. I've been following Paytm since 2014, right? So it took me 7 years to align with Vijay's vision. And when the opportunity came, he didn't need to pitch Paytm to me. I was desperate to take the job because I was very sure that even if I could do 1% of what Vijay has done in India with Paytm to convert the digital ecosystem, if I can do 1% of that in the wealth space, I think I'd have had a legacy to share 10 years from today. Yeah, I hope I answered your question, Prateek. You want to take the next question? Nitin has a question saying, any comments on disrupting the Play Store, App Store ecosystem? Lots of comments, my friend. Good question. I personally love disruption. When the whole Paytm incident happened, when I'm sure you know because you asked the question, where the app was removed, I was very clear on one thing. I said, hey, how can a company become the maker, the platform, the judge, the juror, the executioner, the lawyer, and an app or a platform which has 400 million customers is knocked off for 4 or 5 hours, and customers and everybody is waiting, and there's no rational reason given, and there's no rational person to talk to, right? And you can only talk to an email ID, which is not so cool. So I think that led to a conversation saying, hey, is that first a business opportunity? Second, is it opportunity worth disrupting? And third, is it necessary? And fourth, how well are we placed? So Paytm, most of you may not know, have launched their mini app program almost 2.5 years back. And the biggest mini app is called Paytm Payments Bank. So we have a payments bank which runs on a mobile phone and which has 6 crore customers on it. And we are by far India's largest KYC bank, and it's a profitable bank. And it runs off your mobile phone, and you'll never see a branch or something around. And it's a fantastic mini app which has millions of transactions being processed every day, running and doing the job of a payments bank. And this is different from our wallet and from our UPI business, right? So the mini app construct was already there. Paytm Money mini app was also hosted on Paytm. And when we saw this whole thing happen and we saw an opportunity, we felt that it's the right thing to do. How do I feel about it? I think it's a fantastic thing because if you think about it, the whole of India will the whole of India, I think, is changing, and we are becoming a technology-led country. Many others are not. The world is not becoming technology-led. Largely it is, but I think India is becoming, like you see China, like you see America, a very important tech economy. And I think in a tech economy, it's very important not to have monopoly, and therefore having not one, but maybe 3, 4 app ecosystems is important. Now, maybe you don't know the reason why this whole thing became an outrage is because Google had proposed a 30% charge on any payment that you do in an app. So let's say you have an idea and you launch an app and it's to collect school fees, you have to pay 30%. Or if Zoho charges a fee to its clients, Zoho has to pay 30% to Google. 30% is a lot of money, right? And I think we've done it at zero. But I think that's the game, and I see a huge future on the Play Store side, on the App Store side, for many new models to emerge. And I hope that Paytm also succeeds there. Future of remote work in India, will Paytm Money hire gig workers? So future of remote work in India, let me give you a feeling. So I took my job and I moved to Bangalore. So I worked in Bangalore for the last 3 months. Day before yesterday, I drove from Bangalore to Bombay. So now I'm in Bombay. In a month's time, most probably I'll be in Goa. And I think what I realized is most of my team across India is no more in any office. They are mostly at their homes in different parts of India. Maybe some of them are even abroad and I don't know about it. And honestly, the way we've thought about it as Paytm Money is we have 3, 4 offices. We'll give our people the option to work from anywhere. So I think what will happen in India in future is I don't see it going fully remote because of infrastructure reasons in India. Most people suffer with very poor internet, or the reason is that you're not able to work with people because of infra, etc., etc. But also I think there's a huge chance that our infrastructure of travel to office is so poor that it is more efficient to work from home for majority, but go for small important meetings to work, to office, to meet people, to see people, to not always work in one single room yourself, right? So I think the future of remote work in India is very bright. We are not going to come back to our office till June of next year. Now, will Paytm Money hire gig workers? We already have a lot of gig workers. So if you're interested, please add me on LinkedIn or on Twitter and send me a mail, and I'll be more than happy. But we are already in the process. I think most of us now. But the only thing with gig workers, what I find is, I think more than gig workers, what will take off in India is remote full-time work, because the workload is a lot. So you won't be able to gig between different projects, because then your concentration goes down and you don't have high value gig work. See, gig work is present in a very low value or medium value. But if you want high value, which means you want a high ROI for your time, then it is better to get committed to something, but in a gig economy way. So we call it gigonomy, because the gigonomy allows you to not be stuck, and you have an option to exit when you like. And I think that's going to be the future of remote work. But yeah, I personally would love, to work off Goa, Hawaii, or wherever. And thanks to COVID, people realize that they can actually work remotely and be happy, like this session. I think those were the questions. If somebody asks me, can you share me this live mail? Yeah, I think somebody
Yes,
will.
we will share him the live.
I don't know how that works.
We'll share him the recording. Thank you very much, Mr.
Okay.
Sridhar, for this talk. There's so much to learn in the last 1 hour. I just can't thank you enough. Some key takeaways. Too much of planning kills agility. Ideas don't have value. Implementation does. A great team is made up of people with contrarian views, and lots more. Thank you very much. We are very elated to have you talk to our audience, and we look forward to connecting with you again in the near future.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just add some closing thoughts.
Yes, please.
Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Can I? So, I think just my last closing remarks to all of you. I see a lot of young people in India. I see a lot of different types. Somebody once asked me a question saying, "Hey, Varun, which is the best school how did you learn all this? And, which is the best place you would recommend me for learning? Which book should I read? What should I do to learn all this?" And I have just one answer to give you. And I always say this to everybody, every session I speak: please travel. Travel is the best project management, is the best MBA, is the best engineering, is the best work experience you can get. And I've traveled over 50 odd countries. And, when I was last 3 months, I was in Bangalore. It was COVID times, but I went to Chikmagalur, I went to Coorg, I went to Kabini, I went a bunch of treks, I took my cycle, and I did a bunch of stuff, right? Every weekend I was out doing something with somebody. And I think that's important, because there's nothing more experiential than travel. And so please, as you go along this journey of yours, try and travel. So that's the first comment. And second, if you want to get in touch with me personally, you want to ask me something, I'm available on LinkedIn, so please add me. I'm very happy to chat. I was very happy to be here. I sincerely hope all of you have a good Diwali. And, eat some sweets, don't burst crackers, please. Right, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.